Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the last session of the afternoon. We're going to be inviting some client organisations onto the stage, and they'll give us their perspective on what the strategies are that are driving international activities. So I'm going to kick off. I'm going to do a bit of a presentation about what buildingSMART International is doing and how we're helping all these organisations work together. And then invite Casey Rutland onto the stage. Well, actually, I'm not. He's going to be doing it virtually. And then Michael Kennerly, Adrian Wildenauer, and Will Sharp. So without further ado, I want to talk to you about how we are raising standards for a digital future. And there's a play on words there. So there's raising standards as in improving the standards. And there's also the ability to grow them as well, which is exactly what we're doing within the organisation. What we know is that we're predominantly a demand-led organisation, and we've seen that this morning from some of the presentations. Industry wants the ability to understand the whole life cycle, and they want to be able to understand the value of that whole life cycle, so they can do analysis of their total expenditure. What's the CapEx, what's the OpEx, what the two look like together. And if the building is going to last 50 years, they want to know at the beginning that it's going to be a better value solution at the beginning of that 50 years, not wait for the 50 years. So people who are managing portfolios of assets, they want many things. They want to be able to understand the criticality of a particular asset. They want to know the condition of it. They want to know the performance of it. And they also want to be able to identify it. Where is it? What work is it doing? Where is it in the building in association with other assets? And they want to be able to make proper risk assessments, and they also need standards and data systems to be able to stitch all that together. So this is all at the highest level of the industry is what they're thinking about there. And ultimately, of course, we will enable, through open digital ways of working, we'll enable our buildings to be the material banks of the future. So in other words, it will help drive the circular economy. If people are able to assess what's actually in a particular asset and know they can use it at another time for something else. And the reason that organisations, these big philanthropic organisations that are part of buildingSMART community are doing this is because we've all got one eye on the future. We know that there's a sustainability challenge. We know that there's going to be 2 billion more people on the planet. And we want to be able to provide living spaces that are adequate for our future generations, that are not consuming as much carbon, that are reducing this 40% figure that Saline was sharing with us earlier. And what's stitching this journey together from being able to do whole life value management, circular economy, and then provide cities of the future is this interoperability through connected data. And this is what buildingSMART community is doing through the creation of new open digital standards. And ultimately what that will do, of course, is achieve sustainability goals, as well as being able to make assets more cost effective. And it's fair to say that the buildingSMART community are not naive. They know that actually there's a lot of materials that are going to be with us for a long time to come. And the organisations that make those materials are also part of the buildingSMART community, and they know that they've got to do more to reduce the wastefulness and the impact on carbon their products make. But through digital ways of working, we can improve productivity, which actually is woeful in this industry at the moment. We can make better decisions about how those impactful products are used. Do we need to have quite so much of them? Can they be combined with other materials? Can they be produced more efficiently? And these are all the things that are part of the conversations and part of the programs at buildingSMART at the moment, is these sorts of decisions. I think it's probably a philosophical debate to be had in the bar later, is that traditionally it's the poorest in society that pay the price for sustainability. It's those that can't afford, the best and most modern cars, for example. It's those that have the older products that have to pay more tax, keep using those products. Whereas at buildingSMART, it's a different way around, in that it's the big, wealthy, blue chip organisations that are part of our membership who are funding the development of modern methods of construction and the ability to make better decisions about cost, performance, sustainability, and risk assessment. So it's a important thing to be talking about. And what we're really driving is an ecosystem of connected data. There are these three axes on this diagram. One is the supply chain. It's from the owner organizations all the way through to the people that provide the services for providing new infrastructure and buildings. It's the whole asset life cycle, as I've already said, from first objectives all the way through to disposal of the building, and is also the scope. This applies at portfolio level, portfolio of assets, or it might apply at a facility level, or it might apply at a system of products, or even just at product level. But being able to have the right information at the right time about the right level, with the right level of information, right level of detail, is very, very important. And it's all needs to be stitched together using this system of connected data, this ecosystem of connected data, which is software agnostic. And we've seen good examples today of how suppliers requirements and how the software vendors are involved in the community as well, and they are providing software that is interoperable, and that in turn will then feed back to the people, the requirements, and give us a closed loop. So now a bit about how buildingSMART is organised in order to allow hundreds of people from around the world, each of whom work for different companies, how they're organised to allow them to work together effectively. And we've kind of compartmentalised. So we've layered at three levels. There's a strategic definition level, there's a domain definition, and there's a use case definition. And on the left-hand side, I'm showing requirements. On the right-hand side, I'm going to be showing responses. I've already spoken at the strategic level. We've talked about that just now. And then at domain level, we have compartmentalized still further into specialist domains. And these specialist domains we call rooms. There are 9 rooms at the moment in the buildingSMART International Organisation. There could be more. If the community wants more and there's enough demand for it, we'll create another specialist domain. And the domains that we have at the moment are airport, building, construction, infrastructure, product, technical, regulatory, railway, and the sustainability energy management room, our newest one. And each of these rooms are led by leaders, people from the community, from the membership community, who understand the requirements. And then at the next level down, we have more granular use cases, specific things that need doing. And I'm showing here at the bottom the particular use cases that went into the development of IFC 4.3, which is putting the infrastructure entities into IFC. And then we start to respond to that with outputs. So the one output was the creation of the IFC 4.3 standard. Another thing that we've introduced is this validation and certification service that we've heard about earlier as well. And then we have another project that's starting, which is railway users now working within the buildingSMART community to apply IFC 4.3 to their real capital projects. And at domain level, we could say that we have our yearbooks, and there's some available for you to take away with you. They're available online as well. And these are full of use cases. No, they're not. They're full of case studies. And there's nothing better than a case study where a real organization has used openBIM processes and they've demonstrated benefit. It's a very, very strong way of selling to the rest of the community that actually if you apply this way of thinking, if you apply openBIM processes, it will give you benefits. Look what we did. There are work that we're doing on the Horizon EU 2020 projects, and there's the Accelerated Projects Initiative as well, which is about helping client organizations apply digital ways of thinking in their own organisation. And then finally, back at strategic definition level, well, our ultimate goal is what I was selling earlier at the very beginning. So I want to talk a little bit about the phases of buildingSMART International. buildingSMART International was formed in 2014. Before that was the chapter. You know, it'd been running since 1994 by the founding members. Created good things. You know, it created IFC. It set up the agreement with ISO, so that buildingSMART and ISO have a partnership. It created IDMs. The MVDs were created at that time as well. BCF, we just heard about BCF from David. And as I say, there was this chapter community and of BIM consultancy and vendors as well. But in 2014, buildingSMART International was formed, and it's gone through 3 phases. They're not terribly distinct phases, but nonetheless they are phases. And the first phase was the establishment phase, and this is when Richard Petrie really set out the strategy for what buildingSMART International was going to do. So this was about setting up the business. It was putting in place processes and structure. It was creating the BSI process, which is the thing that allows international consensus, but also allows structured working with pace and rigor. And the business platforms that we all are using today that didn't exist before, but now help us run the business, and building the community. The community has grown enormously from when buildingSMART International first started, and it's about promoting the vision. The next phase was really integration. So taking the standards that have been created before, going to the good work that has been done before, and integrating it into new and better standards. So IFC 4.3 we've talked about, but also the creation of the new services, such as use case management service, the buildingSMART data dictionary, IDS we heard about earlier as well. That's being socialized at the moment as it's going through the development phase of the BSI process and validation, and of course continuing engagement with ISO. So integrating what went before and providing value solutions and standards. And the third phase, which we're in now, and as I say, we're still doing a lot of phase 2. The third phase is about deployment. It's about applying our standards into real life examples. It's about looking at the CO2 question and what we do about that. And there's several projects and several proposals, I should say, in several of the rooms that are looking at that. And there's something that we want to be doing collectively as a strategic group to respond to the European Commission challenge on CO2 as well, which we'll be setting up. Here's our rooms. The reason I put this slide up is it's probably my favorite slide, because this is the leadership community that actually leads the Solutions and Standards program. Each of these rooms, which I previously named, has a representative on it from a member organisation. And as I say, these are the people that know what their part of the industry needs. They reach out and they put together a mission and a vision for the room and a long-term plan. And then there are activities which are turned into projects which then deliver output, deliver new things through the project process. So a lot of these people are here this week. Reach out to them. They're going to be presenting over the next 2 days. This is the bulk of the work, is what these people will be doing and sharing with you over the next 2 days. So go and talk to them. And if you have got an activity proposal, if you've got a requirement from your business or from your region, come and talk to us. Come and talk to one of these people, and we'll help you get it going. So some achievements over the last few years. The IFC 4.3 standard has been delivered. It's a production standard, a BSI production standard. It is now safe for software vendors to use, and we've already seen this morning that some software vendors have already adopted and have started using it. The reason it's safe is because the projects to deliver it in the infrastructure in the railway room, not only did they engage with the supply chain and the owners, they also engaged with the software vendors. They were part of the process of creating it, part of the validation. So this is now safe to use. Statement from Richard Petrie, his last statement he wrote for the business actually was, earlier this year, buildingSMART International sent the full IFC 4.3 final production standard to ISO to initiate the process of elevating the standard to become a formal ISO and in parallel a 7 standard. This is a very important and significant milestone, and it represents the conclusion of at least 7 years of concentrated project work and multiple projects across our community. So, yeah, it's, as it says, great collaboration between lots of people and lots of investment of time and money. And then this is showing the BSI process in parallel with the ISO process. So here's our BSI process in all its glory, production standard, which is broadly equivalent to an ISO draft international standard. If I just show you what that looks like focused in. So the ISO process is being managed by ISO, and we're integrated with that. The BSI production standard has had some editorial committee look at it, and there's been some document modifications. That's now complete. So there'll be the draft international standard will be voted on next February, and then the publication processing means that it's expected to be a new ISO standard by 2023. And that's very important, of course, because being an ISO standard just reinforces that credibility that it's safe to use. And then we'll also be adding in the tunnel domains at a later time. There's a project going on at the moment with tunnel, and that will progress. Other things, so IFC 4.3, applying that into real life goals. So again, to help clients formulate the request to contracts, and then also to help suppliers respond to that request. So very much moving towards model as a legal document in the railway domain by applying this. Big project, nearly €1 million to do this. The Sustainability Energy Management Room, we heard from Trinidad earlier. It's concentrated on the electrical network, and it's a major engagement by Schneider Electric and Siemens, and actually we're getting input from ABB as well, 3 big engineering companies working together, competitors working together to develop a new standard. So the charter and the mission and the roadmap, the draft roadmap for this room are now published. And we've had some big successes recently with our product room. This is the room that's engaging with our or engaging with manufacturing organizations. So we had a workshop recently with Schindler Elevators and with Stora Enso Modular Buildings. Really, it's about creating a domain for global manufacturers to have, neutral solutions so they can feed their requirements into the AEC supply chain. So automation, efficiency, growth, and lots of other things that they're requiring as well. And then some specific use cases, such as being able to put elevator-specific entities into the BSDD, which is similar to something else we're doing elsewhere, which I'll touch on in a moment. Another big project is the Asset Operations Handover Framework. So this is about handover from capital build to operations. It's an important topic. It started actually with just building systems, electrical maintenance, or equipment maintenance, I should say, building systems equipment maintenance, just to get that right. But we're now expanding it for all asset operations, not just in buildings, but also in the horizontal assets as well, infrastructure. So we've got 2 projects on the go. There's the initial BSEM, and then we've got a program of work to develop a modular framework. And lots of interest, as I say, more funding is needed for this. So this is something that you are interested in. Come and talk to us. Go and see the presentations later this week, and you'll learn more about it. And then some more examples of community input into the work effort. The airport room has been conducting a survey on baggage handling equipment, big part of airport operations. So this was about getting a set of common definitions for the baggage system entities. And that survey has been very successful, lots of responses. It's been translated into many different languages. And then the regulatory room have also done a survey. They wanted to understand more about, the opportunities for engagement of openBIM in the regulatory process. People have to give permission for something to be built. And again, that survey is successful, good feedback, translated into lots of languages and published already, that one. And then the infrastructure room, and all rooms, by the way, they have to create these roadmaps, these plans for how to respond to what the requirements are. The infrastructure room have been refreshing theirs. They've held workshops in at least 5 regions so far, and they're using a common model that we've defined, so that you're getting consistent feedback, well, not consistent feedback, but consistent methods of feedback, and what they are feeding back through the various chapters and regions will be assimilated by the steering committee, the room steering committee, and it will form the new roadmap for the infrastructure room to develop what comes next. And although we've been in a pandemic situation, the organisation has been very busy. This is a summary of what the Standards Committee have been consulted on over the last 2 years. And the Standards Committee is our highest level of authority, and basically it's a representative of every member of buildingSMART International. It makes sure we get international consensus. It makes sure that no one organisation can dominate, and it also brings credibility to the standard that's produced at the end, because so many people have been involved in its assessment. So this is what was done in 2021. This is what they've looked at so far in 2022. And the timing of these standards, by the way, when they come out to the Standards Committee, is not to a pre-described time definition. It's dependent on the scope of that project and its individual timeline. So it just so happens that there's been a bit of a clustering towards the end of 2022. And then just to finish off, when I came in, really, this is at strategic level. We really do understand that it's important to influence the senior people in organisations, the people that hold the budget, to convince them of the need for applying openBIM processes, to how it's going to impact on their company objectives, how it's going to impact on their company fortunes, and how it's going to impact on the sustainability agenda. So we do write white papers. You saw one earlier, it's one about digital twins. This is one about liberating built asset information to achieve your organisational objectives. Paper 2 of this will be coming out shortly. There's a strategic team working on it. And then also we've been, within the building room actually, been producing these broad use case papers, which we're calling industry insights. There's been 5 of these published, and they've been looking at airports, real estate, universities, and a couple of other regions as well. So they're worth a read, and already published. So thank you very much. Hopefully I've illustrated there's a lot going on. There's plenty of opportunity for everybody to get involved, actually. And if you've got business requirements that need resolving, come to us, come and find us, and we can help you realize those, help you to control your digital destiny. So thank you very much. Right, next up is Casey Rutland. Now, I might try. I'm not as clever as Celine. I can't do it just by remembering people's bios. But let's just check if Casey's there, because Casey's actually presenting remotely. He wanted to be with us, but he wasn't able to. So Casey, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, Richard, thank you.
Excellent, there you are. What can you see, by the way?
I can see my face at the moment.
Okay, all right, you can't see the room.
I could earlier when you were presenting. Yeah,
all right,
I can now.
All right, I'm going to try and do it actually without referring to notes, but I don't think I'll get very far. So Casey's an architect, and he's also the founder of Digital Green, which is an organisation that brings digital transformation to the real estate sector. And he's also the chair of buildingSMART UK and Ireland, and he is the vice chair of NEMA, which was formerly the UK BIM Alliance. He's a workstream champion of the UK government and industry interoperability group's work on IFC and COBE. Sorry, I stumbled over that one. And he's a steering group member of the CLC Digital Network and committee member of B555 for the British Standards Institution. And I didn't do that from memory, Casey. I did read it. I had to give in. So over to you, Casey.
Thanks, Richard. You'd think by now we figured out an easier way to say interoperability, wouldn't you? But here we are. Thank you again for asking me to speak and giving me the opportunity to do so. This presentation has been created as part of this agenda, talking about global perspectives and strategies that drive international activities. And this specific part is called engaging a wider audience. I'm going to go through a few bits and pieces. I don't need to go through any detail about who I am. Richard's done a very good job for me. Quite handily for you guys, I've dressed as my avatar today, so there's no confusion there. Lots of different hats, lots of different activities, and usefully in my day job, what all these different hats allow me to do is to influence various different organisations, whether it be private sector all the way up through to the government departments, and really bring them an understanding of what interoperability can do for various different parties along the way. And that's really about where my emphasis is coming from, particularly as the chair of buildingSMART UK and Ireland. It's about how can we spread the word to the point where it becomes useful and valuable to any stakeholder in not only the design and construction piece, but on the client side, on the specification side, on the delivery side, on the checking and assurance side, on the exploitation side, on the presentation side, all of these different activities that we will go through throughout the life cycle of built and natural assets. Perhaps a simple question to start with, one I'm not going to give an answer for. There are people out there in the audience who can answer that question in many different ways, I'm sure. But my perspective on this is that I'm not going to provide an answer to this question, but I think what we need to do is to understand how IFC is perceived by our, or what we think is our audience, because we do have our own set of challenges. So we really do need to understand who the target audience is for various different discussions that we have in order that we can explain the benefits. And I'd agree with Richard earlier talking about the yearbooks with the case studies within them. It's a great resource to share with people, to see and to give them comfort that they're not guinea pigs, they're not starting this, they're not going it alone. People have been doing it, delivering it, winning competitions, doing it, winning awards. So there really is opportunity to start using the resources that are beginning to be formed so that we talk to them on their terms about their challenges. And yet we talk to them about our topic, about interoperability and about IFC and the suite of standards that we have. So in a nutshell, and this has probably not been reviewed by buildingSMART International, but we do have an image problem. Whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it, whether we deal with it, we as buildingSMART have an image problem with IFC. Now, part of my role as chair of buildingSMART UK and Ireland, I'm going to say Bazooki from now on because that's what we call it, is to go and prod some people and find out what their true opinions of IFC and interoperability as it exists, and indeed buildingSMART, to try and throw some questions out there, some challenges out onto social media, out into rooms, in meeting rooms and the forums that I find myself in. And often the response is not necessarily favourable. It's not doing us any great positive help. It could in some cases be doing us some harm. So we need to understand that we can address this. And I do have to acknowledge there's a slight tongue-in-cheek element to this, but I also have to personally acknowledge that the work that's been done at international level in terms of the resources that are available on the website and the way that it's been communicated has changed massively in the past couple of years. And it's really good to see that that's happening. So we do need to start to think about our audience out there in the industry. So to the every person, so no matter who they are, what is IFC to these people? And what you'll find is that these things are common themes where people start to not necessarily understand the detail of what IFC and openBIM and interoperability can afford them, but it's difficult for them. And in some cases, as you can see, some people see it as some sort of magical wizardry. And that's not the kind of approach that we need. And yet that's what we have. There's a latent misunderstanding of what IFC can do. And I often liken this to me not being able to understand HTML, but I can use a website. And we really do need to shift that perception, shift that understanding. In an ideal world, I think no one should know, or a very few people out in the industry delivering and maintaining, operating the built environment don't need to know about IFC. They need to know it exists. They don't need to know the technical side. we think the software and the tools that they use should be able to do that for them. So there's a big pickup of opportunity by the software providers, software developers, to make that a lot easier for people. And again, the way we describe that to the every person enables that demand. What is IFC to the client? Often confusing, often seen as being someone else's problem, or expensive, or it might be a legal requirement, depending on where you are around the world. But it's certainly, there's an element of being unloved and not necessarily understood. And effectively what we have is a way of digitally describing assets in the built environment, enabling people to do wonderful, amazing things, to solve real world problems, to solve the challenges of decarbonisation, of net zero and better sustainability, to understand better economically how your assets are performing, to enable you to use and maximise different dashboarding or BI tools to give you more information to make better decisions. And these are real practical things that clients are having to do right now. They're all having to deal with these things. And a fundamental understanding of what you have in a built environment in a digital way would be a great start. In terms of design and construction teams, it's very much seen as being something time intensive, it's hard work, it's a necessary evil. Some people just don't want to do it because it's shit. It might be wrong, but that's their perception. And then some people think it's something to do with the matrix, and it's not really anything to do with them. And these are realities of the perceptions. Still extending that point that we do have an image problem about interoperability and openBIM. Product manufacturers, we are having some successes in the product room, as Richard mentioned, but not all product manufacturers by any stretch of the imagination. Some people see it as being completely unnecessary. Again, it's something that other people will deal with. It's not my thing. We don't really have to engage with it. It's a threat to their USP, because the way they explain their products in a marketing way, using marketing as a tool, they can appear to be better than their competitors. Whereas the IFC structure enables things to be listed out in a standard way with product data templates feeding in through the data dictionary. And it's a direct comparison. We can see how one product compares to another product in very comparable ways. We can do it when we're shopping. Why can't we do it with the built environment? Is it difficult? Yes, it's difficult. It's not. It's something that needs to be learned. It's something that needs to be understood, but in the right way. And when it's explained to people in the right way, they see the value of it. Is it incomplete? It's often seen as being incomplete. My counter to this argument is, yes, it is incomplete, but it's forever expanding, and it will forever expand as and when new properties are added to it, new products are added, new entities are added. So it will be never complete. It will always be expanding to cater for the things that we have in our modern worlds. And some people see it as just not being the solution. So we really do need to engage product manufacturers. There are a lot of really smart manufacturers out there doing some great work with product data templates, with data libraries, understanding how, or us in needing to understand how they operate around the world with multiple different standards for different countries and different price points and different products and materials. So we do need to really bring them on board and get that thriving community into our way of talking. The operational team, let's be honest, a lot of them are unaware of it. A lot of them think it's incompatible with their current systems. A lot of them assume that they then have to suddenly become computer whizzes and enable them to run around 3D models doing certain things. It doesn't always mean that. It could just be a standard structured way of defining what you have and the properties associated with whichever entity it happens to be. Is it unusable? No, it's not unusable. But we just need to communicate the right messages. And again, there are in the yearbook some examples of IFC in use during operations. And it's exactly the kind of thing we need to promote. And when it comes to the expensive discussion, there is, and I think we can all acknowledge there are some challenges with legacy data, with translating that or moving it over to a more globally standardized way of working. But the opportunities to save money, save costs, time, resources, and make all of those efficiencies is huge. And that's the message we need to pass on to people. This is not just a cost. This is something that people should be embracing at all stages of an asset lifecycle and make sure that they're leveraging all of the good stuff that comes with being able to use data for multiple purposes. big software developers, and I have put big software developer intentionally. Some see it as being unnecessary, some see it as being a threat. Some people just think it's rubbish. Some people think it's for other people, or it's a dead schema because something else is going to come along. Interestingly, one of the Bazooki committee, Emma Hooper, many of you will know her, recently put something out on social media in response to other people's criticism of IFC. I think we can all agree that we do need a standardized way of describing the built environment that's computer readable and human interpretable. Any other solution that anyone comes up with will have exactly the same challenges that IFC has, whether it comes to implementation within software, whether it's about awareness and understanding within the general population. It doesn't matter what it is, there is still that requirement for whatever schema we end up using for it to be accepted by industry, by newcomers to the industry, by new players. They will always have the same challenges. So in effect, we'll be throwing away over 25 years worth of development of a schema that exists, that has been built on global understanding and input that we can really leverage. And we should be doing that. We should be celebrating that. And then there's us lot, the buildingSMART international community, the family. For us, as far as we're concerned, it's the obvious thing to do. It's the right thing. It's wonderful. It's the holy grail, maybe. It's the center of what we do. It's how we promote what we do. It's how I talk to my clients about using open data formats to ensure that the information about their assets sits outside of the software that created it, or can exist outside of the software that created it, and then can be consumed by other software. And that way you get efficiencies throughout any organization. So there's lots of different perspectives and different audience types that we're trying to reach. So how are we as buildingSMART UK and Ireland trying to deal with that? As Richard mentioned in the intro, we have been powered by the UK BIM Alliance since 2015, since it moved from the BRE into the UK BIM Alliance. And with our rebrand, our launch a couple of weeks ago as NEMA, which means thread in Greek, it's really about building a new identity, a different way of communicating with people, a different set of behaviours. And part of those is learning and understanding what our audience is, what our membership is, what the industry is, and what they need. So this relationship is obviously continuing. I am vice chair of NEMA. I'm chair of buildingSMART UK and Ireland. And the activities are becoming more and more combined as we go through. But I think one of the successes of the two parts of the organisation is that NEMA very much focuses on the ISO 19650 suite of documents in terms of the process, in terms of specifying and delivering and checking, procuring, and the contractual side of things. And buildingSMART UK and Ireland very much focus on the openBIM, the IFC piece. Now, neither of those organisations go anywhere near anything other than those two things, really. There is technology and software and hardware and things on the outside of that, but we're not really engaging with AI, with machine learning, with drones, with all those other things we see as distractions, whereas these are the foundational parts of what's going to enable our industry to transform and to move on. We fully embrace that those other things exist. We have written positioning papers when it comes to digital twins and how the BIM process creates a structured set of data about the built environment. It's a great foundation for a digital twin to then add dynamic data to. So these things are all there and ready for industry to pick up and start to lean on and leverage and make use of when they're implementing. Now, NEMA has an ultimate vision, which is a thriving and sustainable built and natural environment transformed by exploiting purpose-driven data. Much of the same language that we use within buildingSMART, but twisted and hopefully made to be more open and accessible in terms of our vision. It's quite a lofty vision, lofty ambition, but we're certainly on track to enabling people in their small parts of the industry to be able to do that. So within Bazooki itself, we have what we call our 4 Vs. They're to do with how we engage with industry in order to attract more people using the right language, their language for our topics. So we are vast, vibrant, vital, and valuable. with a little bit more explanation of how we're going to be doing each of those 4 activities, those hero words. We do need to spread awareness, but we need to do it in the right way. We're not jumping straight into the technical side of things. We have people that can do that. I have a massively supportive committee group who have huge experience, and I lean on them quite a lot in order to make things work out there in the industry, to give the right advice when things get technical. But we've got to remember that there's this long tail in the industry that isn't yet digital. So they need to be brought along this journey. They need to be spoken to in a different manner with different resources. And we'll come on to a little bit of that in a minute. And we need to be valuable. We need to make sure that we are representing the needs of the UK and Ireland for various different things, governmental targets and initiatives that we need to fit in with, that we want openBIM and our processes to work for us. And to engage with the industry in that way. One of the other big focuses of our discussion and our communications is moving the conversation, on from BIM to IM. Now, the conversation has always been about information management. It's always been that throughout the BIM process as it was. But we really do need to start the discussions as an on-ramp to anyone's digitalization, to start the discussion around information management. Some organizations, some parts of the supply chain stakeholders will need to then talk about BIM as it was before, as we knew it before, when we start to talk about 3D models and things like that. But actually, the ISO suite of documents very much focuses on information management. And what we saw in our previous guys, when we were starting the conversation talking about BIM, it was very much an on-off switch. So people would either say, yes, we're interested, let's get on with it, or that's not to do with us, that's someone else's job. Interestingly, when we start the conversation with information management, we engage everybody from day one. No one can say that's not part of their role. And that's really part of the initial stage of engaging people, then bringing them into a more BIM-focused discussion if they need to, whereas we can talk to product manufacturers about information management all the way through. In a continuous manner, very, very easily. So it's about engaging different groups of people in different ways. And so far, the transition to information management has helped us with that discussion. Alongside that, there's the notion that we are all, whether irrespective of what stage we're engaged with in the process, we're all information managers. So we just need to be better at it, granted, but we're all information managers. There's a process out there through ISO 19650 to guide everyone through it, playing their particular roles. And I think everyone would be able to find their position within that process to understand where information management is important and where it can be bettered through various different means. And then obviously where we can provide the data in interoperable formats. So information management has always been our focus. We just need to make sure that BIM is still part of the conversation. We're not getting rid of it. A lot of people have seen our rebranding and said, oh, you're ditching the BIM thing now, when the industry's not even getting used to that yet. We're not. That's not part of the conversation. We're not ditching BIM at all. We're just starting the conversation from a different angle. And that has, whether the naysayers like it or not, that has generated a much more positive reception for the conversations that we're having, and has resulted in a few great relationships and patronages and different involvements in different projects that have really benefited not only NEMA as an organisation, but buildingSMART UK and Ireland as well. And that's what makes what we do as a global organisation relevant to all stakeholders. So if you learn anything from this, I'd say start the conversation in a slightly different way. Only go to technical when it needs to be technical. Another thing that we've produced, again, an idea spurred on by Emma, and with great input from the rest of the committee and various authors. We wrote an IFC special report, which was published in the AC magazine earlier on this year. It was very, very well received. Several of the articles listed in the top 10 most read articles from AC magazine for the year. With a list of the articles we've got on screen at the moment, some real plain language discussions about what buildingSMART is. Why do we need interoperability? Why do we need a data structure? How how does IFC work with infrastructure? There's a case study in there with Hinkley Point C, which is a nuclear power plant, a new generation nuclear power plant. How do we specify information using IFC and the standards, using a real education project? And the rise of open source developers, huge numbers of, or comparatively huge numbers of software startups or smaller companies making use of IFC as a core part, an inherent part of their products and their service. And we're seeing that increasing now. And it is becoming a bigger discussion than it has ever been, to a point where it is challenging larger organizations. And then something about the buildingSMART professional certification scheme, which we have just launched in the UK and Ireland. And the important thing is that we think, and the feedback is that we did, that we used fairly normal language. We didn't get into BIM language. We didn't get into buildingSMART language. We tried to expand the acronyms wherever we could and talk in very plain words. So lots of great views, lots of increased social media engagement across all the platforms. Search it on Google and have a read. Really happy to do that. So we do have strategies for a wider engagement, and that's to use plain language, first of all, celebrate and demonstrate success using the case studies, using the awards, using whatever you can to communicate and give people comfort. Communicate that IFC and openBIM interoperability as a whole is an enabler of solving challenges. And we really do need to address the why isn't IFC business as usual conversation. There's a lot of that goes on. It is claimed to be not fit for purpose when we know you've got to define your purpose first initially. But just because it isn't globally accepted doesn't mean it's not fit for purpose. Any other data structure about a built environment would have exactly the same challenge as we said earlier. So we do need to comprehensively address that in a way that engages people. And let's not be afraid of talking about money. There aren't enough people out there who are able to explain the benefits of using a data structure that means the information can sit outside of software that then enables different apps or software to gain some sort of insight into what that data means. But it's not just about engagement. We are very much about adoption and implementation, and there are many projects up and down the UK and Ireland that are doing these things, that we are engaging with, that we are drawing inspiration from it and sharing at various different conferences and through other communication routes. So we really do need to start celebrating that and helping people along. So that's me done. I think I'm probably a little bit over time, so I apologise for that. But if anyone wants to connect with us afterwards, scan the QR code that's on screen. You get to all the various different links for both organisations, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Casey, if you can, I'm not sure how much you can hear, but there's a big round of applause for you just then. Has he gone?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. In that case, I'm going to introduce Michael Kennerly. Michael is the Director of the Design Bureau at the Iowa Department of Transportation. He's also the Chair of AASHTO, Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards. So welcome, Michael.
This morning, when Ian was making his comments, he said that if we had a chance to say something to Mrs. Petrie before we left, we should. They say behind every great man is an even greater woman. When you look at everything that's going on here, I think you can see just how great he was, and I want to thank you for enabling him to do everything he did for us. And what I want to talk about is the importance of open standards for BIM implementation in the US. And I want to start with this quote. It says, "The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight." You know, our last speaker talked about the fact that we are all, information managers, and the key being, how do you turn data into information? When it comes to the importance of it in the United States, this study was done actually a few years ago, but it talks about the fact that the cost of poor interoperability in the United States is costing us $15.8 billion a year. I could actually end with about that in terms of why it's important to the US, but, at its core, BIM is about information management. And information management is really about a supply chain of information that ties all the stakeholders together. And it's important for that chain to be linked accurately, efficiently, and correctly. But we know with some poor interoperability, it doesn't always happen the way we want. And one of the things that we're recognizing in regard to the importance of open standards in the US is that supply chain has more sources than it ever has. Most of us, when we talk about this topic, we're looking at BIM or the model as the legal document. And that really means about how do we pass information from design through construction. And that's really a critical component of this, and it's really important that we get that right. But when it comes to BIM and its importance in the United States, there was a movie put out several years ago, longer than some of you in this room have been around, called The Graduate. And in that movie, Dustin Hoffman's character is told that the secret to the future is plastic. And now I'm not going to tell you that the secret to BIM is plastic, but I am going to tell you that the secret to BIM is data. And that's one of the things that's changing rapidly in our world. You look at all the information now that we pass to contractors electronically that we never passed 20 years ago. Also, as you look at the change in our work, intelligent compaction is now using electronics, to measure the level of compaction as opposed to the old sheep's foot roller method of, when does it walk out? We have information about our structures in the United States. We have over 600,000 bridges on the interstate and highway system. That represents approximately 3.9 billion square feet of deck. And as transportation agencies, we're responsible for maintaining that asset, which means that we need good information, accurate information in order to do our jobs. In addition to that, we have around 47,000 miles of interstate highway and highways in our system. And that's not including the lane miles, that's just the linear miles. And when you start to think about that as an asset and the information about it that we need to maintain it, open standards becomes critical. The other thing that we're responsible for as a state agency, there are thousands, if in fact millions of features out there that we have to maintain, that we have to keep in good operating order. And we need information about those. And we do have data about those, but changing that into information is what's critical. But you look at all the guardrail, the culverts, lighting, signing, signals, paint marking, roadside vegetation, and our excess right-of-way. All of those are things that we have data about. And they're in systems that unfortunately all too often don't talk well together. In addition to that, annually or biannually, just about every state agency goes out and collects information on its highway system, the condition of the roadway network. We have data from our road and information weather systems that give us real-time feedback on how the system is performing in inclement weather. In addition to that, most of us now have traffic management centers that also give us real-time data about how our system is operating from a traffic management standpoint, the congestion, where the accidents are, where the issues are, to help us plan smartly how to expand that network in order to be able to take care of those issues. We also have, as many of you guys know, a number of other data sources that are coming online. When you start looking at, LiDAR and the use of UAVs, virtual reality, 3D design, augmented reality. One of the things that I'm really happy about, in our office, in our bureau, is the fact that we were able to acquire virtual reality equipment. Now, that is a subject that we never would have considered, 20 years ago. But that data that's necessary to run the virtual reality equipment is a part of our life now. And it allows us to communicate with stakeholders and the public in ways that we never could before. It allows us to communicate design intent much clearer than we ever could before. You know, I used to be a resident maintenance engineer, and I can tell you, sat across from people who were literally crying because they couldn't understand our plans. And now when you think about what we can do with models and virtual reality and augmented reality in order to communicate what we can do, the data that we're collecting is expanding, exponentially. In addition to the data that we're generating internally, we're also now able to get vehicle-to-vehicle information. We were at a conference a couple of years ago, and the director of the New York DOT was talking about the fact that one of the things they wanted to research was how they utilize that vehicle-to-vehicle information in order to help them understand what was going on with their road network, where there were potholes, where there were issues they needed to repair. And again, that's more data that's coming in. And then there's this. Files and cabinets full of information, legacy systems that contain data that's important for decision makers, information managers, in order to manage the assets that we have. And how do we get all of that information, either electronic or in some other means that would allow us to manage the data and, more importantly, manage the assets more efficiently? And so what that really amounts to is we have good news and bad news. The good news is that we have more data in order to do our jobs than at any time in our history. The bad news is we have more data than at any other time in order for us to be able to do our business. And the problem becomes, how do you turn that, into information? And in addition to that, we've got, the new infrastructure bill that was passed in the United States, is pumping $63 billion into our highway systems in 2021. So in addition to what we already have, we're building more. So we have all the data associated with that. And in addition to what we're building, we also have to maintain. We have to maintain the systems that people are currently driving on in order for us to move people and goods efficiently. And again, we need information about where to invest smartly in that highway system. And all of that requires good data. It would be nice to just say that the shift is all about the electronics. But one of the things that we're also doing is we're shifting our design philosophy. We're going to move with the next edition of our Green Book, our standard for design in the United States. We're moving to performance-based design. And what performance-based design really requires is that one word that I keep saying over and over again: data. And data is used to analyze how the system is performing in order for us to make better decisions about what we want to do. So all of a sudden, when you think about it, our world has translated from, paper and, handheld, calculators to all of a sudden being all about data. And, I'm going to skip through some of these quickly just to keep us on time, but I realize you have the presentations, or we'll have them later on, so you can go through this in more detail, but it talks about how performance-based practical design is a decision-making tool that's based on data about your system. Now, how many of you guys have ever played telephone? Oh, come on, I can't be the only one. And telephone is that game where you say something, and the ideal is to see, after you get to the last child, if the information is the same. And invariably, the information is not. No matter what you start off saying, by the time it gets to the last child, it is way different, than what you intended. And unfortunately, poor interoperability acts that way. When you start looking at the information that's transferred from one system to the next system to the next system, poor interoperability all of a sudden means that what goes to the contractor is unfortunately not a lot like what you put out as a designer. And so when you start looking at why it's important, it needs to be consistent. There needs to be reciprocity, synergy, and there needs to be interplay in that data. But when you start thinking about why it's important to us and all the sources, that we have of information, it becomes critical for us as information managers to turn that data into information. And what turns that data into information is analysis. So you take the data, you do an analysis on it, it tells you a story. And that story tells you something about your system. It tells you about where it's operating well and where it's operating poorly. It tells you about what you need to change and what you don't. But it helps you understand how to invest smartly with the limited resources that we have as transportation agencies. And so one of the things that I think is important about BIM, and we learned this through a global scan the FHWA sponsored back in 2019. In the United States, when BIM came out, there were knockdown, drag-out fights about what BIM meant, because it was a vertical, application to a horizontal industry. And we used to have long, drawn-out arguments about what BIM meant and what BIM didn't mean. But when we went on that global scan, one of the things that we heard that I thought was really a good takeaway, and it's something that we've been using quite consistently, and the last speaker talked about, is shifting to a focus that talks about BIM as information management. And so, what you've got to look at is that, why it's important for us is that we have millions of records of data that we need to do an analysis on, that we need to be able to tell a story that tells us about the information about our system. And so BIM really is about our ability to take that information, analyze it, and tell a story about how we can manage those assets throughout our lifetime. Or I should say their lifetime, not our lifetime. Unfortunately, when you think about it though, when you talk about all of that data I talked about, all of us find ourselves like this. You've got so much coming at you from so many different directions in so many different systems that unfortunately don't communicate well. You find yourself in this huge maze of information or data that you're trying to make sense of. And what we've got to do as transportation agencies is move from this to this. And that's where open data standards is the key. And that's why it's so important in the US. Because as transportation officials, it's critical for us to invest the money that we have from the public wisely. And in order for us to do that, we have to be able to have those systems communicate in ways they never have. We have to be able to analyze data in ways that we never have. And we have more data than we ever did in any time in our history. So in order for us to be successful, we have to have open standards, and those open standards have to help us connect the dots so that we can do what we're supposed to do in order to use the money that we get from the public the way they hope. Like I said, at its core, BIM is information management and communication. It's about that information supply chain that, we all are a part of. And, those linkages must allow for the data to be transferred and move seamlessly and efficiently with as little or no loss as possible. And that can only happen with open standards. That can only happen when all of the vendors start to play together so that we as users have the tools that we need to make the kind of analysis that we need in order to make the kind of decisions that we need. Interoperability and open standards is the key to data exchange occurring with minimal to no data loss. One of the things that I think was key for us, in the United States, and there will be sessions that, tomorrow that'll talk about this in more detail. But in 2019, the committee, that Richard talked about that I chaired, made a resolution or proposed a resolution to adopt IFC is a national standard for state transportation agencies. And one of the things that I was really pleased about, because I happened to make that presentation, was that it was accepted unanimously. And that resolution had three components. The adoption of IFC, investigating the ability for the AASHTO states to join buildingSMART International, and then the creation of a cross-discipline team that would really guide our involvement with IFC. And again, there will be a presentation tomorrow that gives you more detail on that joint committee. Has recently been stood up. Mike Busselman from Montana DOT heads that. But it was really something that we felt was key to our success, as that first step in getting toward open standards, was as a group of states communicating clearly what we thought was important and why we thought it was important for us to make this kind of statement and this kind of investment, basically in our future. And it was through those conversations that, I had the joy of working with Ian Howell, Richard Petrie, and having conversations, about what this means and what this can do and why it was important and what it could offer us. And all of those things that I learned through those conversations, I've been sharing as I've gone around and had the opportunity to make presentations in the United States and throughout those committees that I've been working with. But open standards is going to be the thing that makes us all successful, because it's the thing that allows us to communicate in ways that are more efficient than anything we've ever had before. And anybody who's been working with this understands the difficulty of not having open standards and the problems that it's causing. And there's only one way to solve that, guys. There's only one way. And that's to have everybody agree and move forward together and communicate in a way that allows us all to be successful. Thank you.
Michael, that was great. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, if you hand that to Mary-Lily. So we're going to get a perspective from another client now. This is from Adrian Wildenauer. Adrian is a civil engineer and a construction manager. He's head of BIM standardization at the Swiss Federal Railways, SBB. As we're about to learn, SBB is one of the leading building owners in Switzerland for the application of openBIM. And SBB has been a key member and contributed to buildingSMART International for some years, including the development of the IFC 4.3 standard. So Adrian, he represents Switzerland at ISO and CEN, and he represents SBB in many national committees. He's also spent the last 4 years working on his PhD, which he hopes to defend in November. So hopefully for the last time, I want to welcome Mr. Adrian Wildenauer.
Thank you very much. Do you have a... I'm just wondering if you have a file on me, but it's mostly was accurate. So thank you very much for having me. I want to talk about the challenge or the use of openBIM by public clients. Is it a conundrum? Is it a challenge, or is it a chance? So Richard already told everything, almost everything about me. So I click to the next slide, but it doesn't work. Should work. So let's get to the conundrum. So SBB, the Swiss Federal Railways, is the largest railway company and the largest mover of passengers and goods in Switzerland. So basically we are a transportation company. So why should we care about openBIM? It's quite easy, because we own our buildings and we maintain and we operate them by ourselves. So we have 8 hydropower plants. We are one of the largest owner of buildings with around 3,500 buildings. So that's quite a bunch. We have, you can see the figures. We have almost 5,000 bridges, and most important, it's a number on the top. We have 1,200 construction projects every year of every size. Last year it was almost double, so it was around 2,500 construction projects. And if you imagine, we have to work with different parties in every project. So if you take that times 10 or times 50, depending on the project size, you have quite a big number of participants. So, but it's important for us to have the data, as we heard from Philip. We need the data over the whole life cycle to have a life cycle based data management, and we have to have a stable operation, otherwise our clients or our customers wouldn't use us. So what is the challenge? I think you can read it by yourself, but it's a very easy challenge. The Swiss federal government said to us we shall become more interconnected, more performant, more efficient, more cost effective, and more customer friendly. So that's quite a challenge. So it's not that easy. So, but if you think, or if you put it into parts, interconnected, there are some requirements resulting to data. And we heard that data is most important, especially for us as a client or a train operator or a railway operator. We need to be more interconnected. So the customer mobility requirements are changing. So we need reliable and accurate data to track the customers and offer new data-based services. We need to be more performant. We need a robust asset management based on a reliable GIS and the responding BIM data. We need to be efficient. We need data when it is available, which is available, and in the required granularity and quality to enable additional services. We need to be cost effective. I think you can see the piggy bank, so it explains almost everything. So, and last but not least, we need to be more customer friendly. And we must be able to support all of our customers in every time for the travel decision. So what is the chance? We are only a small piece in the puzzle. We can only be successful for our customers, you can see on the picture there, with openBIM, if we are working closely together with the industry. Only that can be quite successful. So what needs to be done with openBIM? I've put some indicative points there. I think you don't need to read them, but I think you get the clue, you get the presentation afterwards. We need the compatibility with other IT solutions. We need implemented standards in software solutions. We need an ecosystem for data, which are in constant exchange with all participants to optimize processes, procedure, and their corresponding tools. We need standards which are understandable, can be taught, can be instructed, and can be used later on. We need a usability. We need standards which can be used without having a PhD. We need standards which are applicable, easy to apply, modular, comprehensible, understandable. We need accessible standards for everyone in the value chain, which are non-discriminatory. We are a public client, so it's very important for us not to discriminate anyone in the process. And moreover, we need a know-how, and more important, the know-why in the industry, when we need the corresponding innovation. And it's a market solution. It's not a one-off solution. We need a market solution for all participants. We need consistency over the standard for standards and over the whole life cycle, and we need a risk reduction. So that's quite a lot. And I think you agree, we can't do it by ourselves. We need the industry, but we need all of you. Well, I actually can't see you, but we need all of you to implement openBIM over the whole value chain. So that's Susie. That's a colleague of mine. She's a train driver, as you may see, and she's questioning herself, what needs to be done to transform openBIM into a chance? And I already showed it yesterday. The most important point is that one. We need to collaborate on the rules, but compete on the game. That's for me the most important part. We need to work together for standards, for basics, for fundamentals, etc. We have to collaborate and work closely together for the rules, but still we can later compete on the game, and we need to do that. Doesn't work. So what is more, we need digital continuity. As I said, we not only plan, build, and operate our assets, but we want to have a smoothly usage afterwards. So we need all data in every stage of the process, and we need a digital continuity for all phases. And moreover, that includes all members or all participants through the value chain. What is more, we need a digital literacy. When I talk to several students or colleague of mine, they never heard of data management in their studies. It's not a teachable subject in Switzerland, for example, and I guess in many other countries as well. So many good stuff was invented by civil engineers and architects, of course, but it's not only about the buildings, it's about the data management behind. And we heard it from Philip. We need a digital literacy. Everybody needs to be taught how to use data management, how to apply standards. And by the way, standards are not taught either. That's very hurtful for me as a standardization guy. So we need this digital literacy. Moreover, we need a digital integration. Everybody in the value chain needs to be integrated, and everybody, I say everybody in the value chain needs to be integrated in the digitalization, in the transformation, and in the standardization. So when I talk about standardization, it always comes to me that it says, well, standardization is quite a dusty job, as we call it in Switzerland, so it's quite boring, it takes ages, but nevertheless, only the guys or the people who are making their part in the standardization can help shape the industry. So, well, I don't need to tell you, but I think you should spread the word on the market. Please participate in every standard you possibly can to have this digital integration of everybody involved. And moreover, we need a digital sustainability. So it's not about only the ESG criteria, so the environmental, social, and governmental regulations, but it's also the financial sustainability. If you're using data management, we have to talk about the financial aspect as well. And I was quite impressed by the numbers with the billions. I lost the numbers already. I think, well, we are spending 6 billion a year on infrastructure in Switzerland for the railways. So I think it was 600 billion or so. Sorry? Oh, so sorry, I got confused with the numbers. So, but nevertheless, it's a huge number, and we have to spend it wisely. And as you just said, Philip, there's a lot going on with data management, and we have to be careful what to support and how to support it, because data management is costly if you don't do it right, and it takes ages if you don't do it right. So what shall we do? It's another point I want to talk is in the industry, as in Switzerland, or well, you can take any other country, I guess. There's a lot of, well, we would like to do, we should like to do, we could do, we might have an additional standard or something, we ought to do something. So maybe we should just do. You know, it would be quite helpful not to talk what's not possible, but to start with small pieces which are possible. So I was asked to do it a bit shorter. So thank you very much, and happy to see you later in the third floor, fourth floor, third floor, whatever. We will meet each other and would be happy to discuss every topic with you. Thank you very much.
Well done, Adrian. Another compelling case from the client organisation. Philip is Michael, by the way. You can have a drink with him later. I'm going to introduce Will Sharp. Will Sharp is HDR's Global Director of Highways, and he's also buildingSMART USA's Roadway and Bridges Industry Committee Chair. He's got 35 years experience, can't be, of highway planning and design. He's also the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards with Michael, and AASHTO BIM for Bridges and Structures Transportation Pool Fund, the National Institute of Building Sciences National BIM Program Steering Committee, and the American Road and Transportation Builders Association Innovation and Technical Forum. Wow. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Well, I'm here today to talk about how the U.S. transportation industry is accelerating toward open data standards. And there's a lot going on with driving standardization in the U.S. And really what's driving this effort is the desire to get to digital workflows, to get to, like Mike mentioned, model as a legal document, where that digital deliverable is the contractual deliverable. And there's a number of factors in the clients that I talk with that are affecting driving standardization. But one I wanted to pick out on this chart is collaboration. It's so important to have collaboration. Sometimes I think we overlook that. We look at the technical side, but change management and collaboration is just critical to driving these standardization efforts. And this is a slide that really encapsulates the vision, my opinion of the vision in the U.S., and really leveraging that digital delivery throughout the life cycle of the projects. So from design to construction, fabrication, and to asset management. And really the key to that is open data standards. That's how we're going to get there. The graph at the bottom, this is from Federal Highway Administration, but really the red line shows the current practice. We lose data every step of the way. We've got to get this life cycle information management focus and really build that data as we move through the projects. So one of the things I wanted to introduce too is this was developed with Mike's committee with the Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards, but they developed different levels for a state agency. As we move to digital workflows and digital delivery, what does that roadmap look like? And, the first two levels here, really leveraging the technology to develop in 3D, using that 3D to automate plan production, in some cases even providing the information to contractors for information only. This is where most of the states are at in the U.S. right now. But there's another area that some of the more innovative states are looking at. What if we deliver that 3D model contractually, what we call model as legal document, and still have the conventional plans, but the model is the contractual deliverable that overrides importance of the plans. So that's level 3. And then moving on to levels 4 and 5, eventually we see going to planless delivery, where there won't be any 2D plans required. Everything the contractor needs to build the project will be in the 3D model and attachments and all digital information. And of course, eventually getting all the way to where we're getting that digital as-built information back from the contractors. So these are the different levels that have been laid out in the U.S. on kind of to help state agencies understand where they're at and kind of how to get to that next step. I also wanted to talk about, where we're at with model as legal document in the U.S. And this is a chart of pilot projects that are completed throughout the U.S. The states in green, there's 6 of those. They've actually completed and built projects with model as legal document. In some cases, they've done 3, 4, 5 iterations of this. So they're really the trendsetters that started this effort. The states in orange here are actually working on their first model as a legal document pilot. Some of those projects have been let for construction, some are in progress. The states in blue, in their strategic plan, they want to move to model as legal document. So we're seeing this more and more in the U.S. It seems like every few months I add more color to this map, but we're definitely seeing a lot of state DOTs moving in this direction. So some ongoing U.S. national efforts just to highlight you on, and I've seen tremendous progress on this in the last 3 years. It's just been amazing. But one of those is AASHTO's efforts, and as Mike noted, Mike chairs the Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards, and they have been one of the drivers really to drive innovation. They're the ones that wrote, the resolution to adopt IFC as the open data standard for AASHTO. So lots of work with that committee. There's also a new committee called the Joint Committee on Data Standardization, or JSTAN. I think, Mike, you mentioned that Mike Bosselman chairs that committee. He'll be presenting tomorrow. And then there's a number of transportation pooled fund efforts as well. And this is an opportunity where the state DOTs can all pitch in funding with Federal Highway Administration to take on some of the harder issues, like developing a national standard for bridges and structures for the U.S. So there's several ongoing pooled fund efforts as well that are helping drive this initiative. Also, Federal Highway Administration has been very active. I think Mike mentioned the global scan that was completed that Mike was a part of. The Everyday Counts program with Federal Highway Administration, one of their key latest initiatives is e-ticketing and digital as-builts. There was a national strategic roadmap for BIM that was published, a 10-year plan of how we move to digital workflows in the U.S. And then the last one on the list, the Advanced Digital Construction Management Systems. This was actually language in the latest IIJA, our latest construction bill in the U.S., and it dedicated $20 million a year for 5 years to really accelerate digital construction, including BIM and open data standards. So we really think that's going to help not only at the state level, but at the national level as well. There's also been good activity with the National Institute of Building Sciences. And I think many in this room know Roger Grant. He's here today. And one thing that NIBS did is they set up a U.S. National BIM Steering Committee that included folks from horizontal infrastructure, vertical infrastructure, technology, and really to focus on, how do we move together for the U.S. as a whole? And there's been a lot of good effort with that. There's actually a U.S. National BIM program that's been developed from that. Some of the other groups I work with, the Highway Engineering Exchange Program. This is a group of the state DOTs that are looking at automation and digital delivery. Transportation Research Board, which many of you are familiar with, and of course the buildingSMART USA chapter. And all three of these groups collaborated. They all support a webinar series that started several years ago. We call it the BIM for Infrastructure webinar series. And I'll send you links to this after this presentation, but there's been some great presentations on that, on where the owners are going, where the designers are going, where the contractors are going, how do we all need to work together. So some great collaboration there. There's also a workshop at the Transportation Research Board meeting in January in Washington, D.C. that's labeled Leveraging Transportation Project Data Throughout the Asset Lifecycle. This is a 3-hour workshop. I think we're going to have great dialogue on what are those key challenges? Where do we need to put focus in to address those challenges? And then several other areas here too. There's also been great collaboration with the stakeholders. And, we need to keep in mind that, the designers have a role in this, the contractors have a role. We all need to work together. So the American Council of Engineering Companies formed a national group to really look at digital delivery. What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are ways to mitigate those risks? So there's been good collaboration with ACEC and Mike's AASHTO committee. The contractors are also getting more organized as well in the U.S. You look at the Associated General Contractors of America, they just formed a digital means and methods group to get coordinated as they move to digital delivery. And also ARPTA, the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, they've actually come out with a policy statement in the last few years that say, we support open data standards. We support model as legal document. So it's really great to see the synergy and the collaboration with the other stakeholders with this as well. And then there's also a lot of activity going on at the state level. these are just 3 examples. Pennsylvania DOT, they had a challenge from their senior leadership to move to digital delivery across their organization by 2025. So they did develop a strategic roadmap. They're methodically working through that roadmap toward that 2025 deadline. Utah DOT has also been one of the national leaders. I know George Lukes from Utah is here. He'll be speaking tomorrow. And then Iowa DOT, where Mike is from, they just had a digital delivery roadmap that was approved by their senior leadership as well. And these are just 3 of the state DOTs. I can tell you this is going on in a number of additional state DOTs as well. So really taking their entire organizations to digital delivery. Another area I want to touch on is how is this going to change our stakeholder collaboration? And this is my opinion, kind of my vision, but I have a vision that I'm an engineer, as a designer, that my final deliverable will actually be an IFC file for the owner. And the owner will use those IFC files to actually advertise the project. That would be a signed and sealed deliverable. And I think the contractor will be able to seamlessly import that data into their files, support things like automated machine guidance, grading, and paving, and also support preparing bids more quickly. And we're going to ask the contractor to export their data post-construction in an openBIM format as well, with the ultimate goal is digital as-built for the owners to support asset management. So open standards really opens up all of these workflows. So some of the key things, when I think back to the last 5 years, some of the key things that I've seen, 2017, there was a new BIM for Bridges and Structures pooled fund that was started to develop an open data standard to take bridges from design to construction and fabrication. 2019, Mike had mentioned the resolution for AASHTO to adopt IFC as the national standard for the states, and also forming the JSTAN committee. 2021, there was a new pooled fund started, the BIM for Infrastructure pooled fund. And then 2022, we actually had the AASHTO Committee on Bridges and Structures adopted a national open data standard for bridges to go from design to construction. And that was adopted unanimously by all 50 states. So I'm seeing some great foundational effort going on in the US in the last few years. And next steps, when I think about where do we go from here, I think we need to keep in mind, I see a very clear vision toward openBIM, toward model as legal document in the US, but we all need to keep in mind we've got to work together in partnership. I see the need for owner mandated open data standards, but those have to be developed in partnership with the contractors and the engineers as well. And I'm seeing more and more synergy as we go, and we need to continue to do that. So a couple other presentations to keep in mind. There's several presentations in the next few days that'll be talking about the U.S. transportation industry and where we're at. Roger Grant and I are talking tomorrow morning on comparing horizontal and vertical BIM efforts in the U.S. Tomorrow afternoon, we have a whole series on openBIM for infrastructure and transportation. So several presentations. And then Thursday, there's another presentation on the BIM for Bridges and Structures work that's up for an international award. So I hope you can attend these. And one thing I did want to provide is a QR code. I have put all of my slides in here, and I've also provided internet links to all of the things that I went over. So that'll give you an opportunity if you want to learn more of like the BIM for Infrastructure webinar series, for example. There's a link that you can see all the webinars that have occurred there. So with that. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.
That concludes all of our speaking and presentations for today. I hope you agree, I'm sure you will agree, that there's been a really good contribution from all areas of our community. We've had the client organizations, we've had the AEC, we've had the vendors, and we're all saying the same message. They're all saying the same message. Collaboration is what this is all about. If we're going to make a difference, we have to work together. And I do love the quote that Adrian shared. It's about, collectively setting the rules, but actually it's not about making the world the same. It's not about making people completely uniform, and it's not about destroying businesses' ability to make money and make profit. So yes, so thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all of our speakers and all our presenters today, please. There are some unsung heroes, of course, that pull all this together. Dan Little, our events manager, and also Aidan Mercer, who isn't able to be here, but he's going to join us now online from home. There he is, peering down on me. Hi, Aidan.
I wouldn't call myself a hero, but thank you, Richard. That's very kind.
Well, what I was going to say is that, to put this agenda together, to collect all these speakers and, build up the whole portfolio, it has taken many months of work, and I know it's a lot of effort. So did you want to just speak to the community? They're all looking at you, by the way. You're sort of like the Wizard of Oz.
It's a bit late. Yeah, sorry that I don't look so good, but I can assure you I look better at the start of the day. But no, I just thank you to all the speakers for putting on such a great event. Just listening to that last session, I was just reminded of the start of the session where we really heard from the vendors. And that whole continuity right through to these client mandates is so critical, as we've been talking about. So yeah, just been really great to be able to connect remotely. I won't get in the way of the cocktails too much. I know my Dutch friends there in the audience will be keen for that cocktail hour. However, I do want to thank a few people, and sorry if I missed anybody off. Firstly, thanks to Eric Poirier for personally being involved in this for over 2.5 years. Thanks, Eric. Also to Martin Lafleur, Bill Moore and OPC, who've had the pleasure of working with us for so long. And I think there's nothing that Eric Drellet can't fix. So thank you to those guys. Thanks to our sponsors, the speakers, the rooms, the awards submitters, attendees, of course, and virtual attendees that I've been with today, which has been a nice experience. Also, thanks to Dan, as you mentioned, and the BSI team behind the scenes, Richard, for your excellent efforts today. Maddie, Susan on the awards programme, Stephen for his support, Patrick for his unwavering support, obviously, and Ian for his interim role. But finally, my sort of last comment, and something that Michael Kennerly touched on, is to reflect on Richard Petrie, really, who I know is here in spirit. He'd always enjoy a glass of red after the day is done and would laugh. His laugh would fill the room. So I think raise a toast to Richard and thank you all for your time. So yeah, enjoy.
We'll do that, Aidan. Yeah, definitely do that. So Aidan, before you sign off today, can you do one last duty and invite everybody onto the stage for a photograph, please?
Yeah, please get on stage and get the pictures, because we use those in all our marketing materials for the next 20 years.
And Aidan, go and get some sleep, because you're going to need it.
I know, yeah. My wife's still not given birth, but it could be any day now. So
all right, well, best wishes to you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so if everybody can come on stage, please, we'll take the group photograph. And then after that, we have the drinks on the 3rd floor. What can I find that kind of